1 in 3 bites of food you eat exists because of a single group of insects. What actually happens if bees vanish overnight? Let's find out. What bees actually do. Western honeybee, Apis mellifera, pollinates roughly a third of global food crops, including apples, almonds, and blueberries. Use open doors. Compared to, almonds are almost entirely dependent on managed honeybee pollination. Without bees, almond orchards would produce close to nothing, unlike wheat or rice, which is open door. In fact, almonds can set up against a sack. The immediate food impact: crops like apples, cherries, and squash would see yields collapse within a single growing season. Compared to, staple grains like wheat, corn, and rice are pollinated by wind, not insects, so bread and rice wouldn't disappear, but the produce aisle would shrink dramatically. The economic shockwave. The almond industry alone, centered heavily in California, depends on trucking in billions of managed honeybees each spring just to pollinate the bloom. Compared to, losing that pollination would be economically similar to an entire industry losing its raw material supply overnight, comparable to an auto plant losing access to steel, not just a minor price bump. Coffee plants can self-pollinate to some degree, but bee pollination is known to noticeably increase both yield and bean quality. Coffee wouldn't vanish, but it would likely get more expensive and less consistent. Could other insects fill the gap? Hoverflies Syrphidae family, and certain wild bee species like the mason bee, Osmia ssp, also pollinate crops, but far less efficiently at scale than managed honeybee colonies. Compared to, replacing bee pollination with human hand pollination, already used for some cacao, would be enormously labor-intensive. Some fruit farms in China have already had to hand pollinate due to wild bee decline, employing workers with pollen-dipped brushes to do a single bee's job by hand. The long-term ecosystem effect. Wildflowers and native plants that rely on bee pollination would decline, affecting animals further up the food chain, from birds to small mammals. Compared to, it's a similar ripple effect to removing wolves from Yellowstone. A single species disappearing reshapes an entire ecosystem, not just one part of it. Just as wolf removal led to overgrazing by deer, bee loss would lead to fewer flowering plants, less seed and fruit production, and fewer animals that depend on both. Bees vanishing wouldn't end civilization overnight, but it would quietly hollow out the food system and the ecosystems around it, from the almond aisle to the forest floor. Subscribe for the next What If. This time, what happens if you shrank to the size of an ant?